Hey, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to give it a few minutes to let people enter the room and get settled. So feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love your name, pronouns, and which organization you're joining us from. All right, welcome, welcome. We'll give it till about another minute, 1:03, to let people jump on. Go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat, name, pronouns, and the organization you're joining us from. I wish we had some music to get this started with, but we'll give it about 60 more seconds.
Hi, Steve. Long time no see.
All right, it is 1:03. The waiting room has slowed down just a little bit, so we'll go ahead and get started. Just so you know, we're going to shut down the webinar chat. So if you have any questions, please feel free to direct them to the question and answer box in the bottom of the webinar screen. All right. So to get us started, so VoteRiders was founded in 2012 as a response to an increase in voter ID laws. We work nationwide with staff this year in 8 states. We help year-round eligible voters who need access to their IDs. We get voters prepared to vote with ID education, delivering accurate information about voter ID rules to communities across the country. And of course, we are nonpartisan, so we're here to support all voters in their right to vote. So this year, we have 2 staff on the ground for VoteRiders Florida. Myself, Taylor Ashley. I am the Florida Coalition Coordinator, and I'm going to toss it to Sam to introduce himself.
Hi, all. My name is Sam. I am the new Florida organizer. So I am on the ground. I am building relationships, and then I'm tossing it over to Taylor, and we're working in unison. We're getting people IDs.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. All right. So partners like you are crucial to our success at VoteRiders. We believe in the power of collaboration, working closely with a diverse range of partners to ensure we reach the groups that are most affected by voter ID laws. Since 2012, we've had the privilege of working with over 1,500 partners that continue to grow in number. So partners like yourselves are our trusted community messengers to our work. Together, we provide resources to voters and offer a pathway to getting the documents they need. These documents not only allow them to vote, but also assist with many other aspects of their life. And partnerships are the heart of our mission, or at the heart of our mission.
And now the bad stuff.
We're going to talk about our voter ID study. So this is the first public study in nearly 20 years focused on who has various types of government issue photo IDs. This survey was funded by VoteRiders, PublicWise, the Center for Democracy and Civic Engagement, and the Brennan Center. And I'm going to pass it to Sam to dig into some of our study.
Sure. Oh boy, strap in. So, nearly 21 million voting age US citizens do not have a current, that is non-expired driver's license. So, just under 9%, or about 20 million people, almost 21 million, who are US citizens, 18 and older, adults, have a non-expired license with no issues on it, no issues with the address or anything. Maybe 10%. It's looking pretty bleak for us. So the study surveyed a representative sample of the U.S. adult citizen population, totaling about 2,386 respondents. To ensure inclusivity, the sample included prepaid cell phone numbers, oversamples of 18 to 24-year-olds, Black respondents, Hispanic respondents, Black and Hispanic, 18 to 24-year-olds, and respondents with an income of less than $30,000 per year. The study provides us with crucial insights into the demographics of those lacking proper identification. So, who lacks ID in the United States? Shockingly, more than 34.5 million voting age citizens do not have an unexpired driver's license or a state ID with their current name and address on it. 14.8% is the number that highlights the barrier that many Americans face when trying to provide an ID to exercise their fundamental right to vote. So, obviously, we're dealing with massive structural inequalities when it comes to the lack of identification that allows people to vote. The Americans who are disproportionately less likely to have a current driver's license include Black Americans, Latinx Americans, individuals with lower annual incomes, and those without a high school diploma or college degree. Young Black Americans, again, shocker, prepare yourselves, are the least likely to possess a driver's license with their current name or address. To put it into perspective, 30% of those surveyed do not have any driver's license at all. And out of the folks that did possess an ID, 47% lack their current name or address. These numbers underscore the urgent need to address the barriers faced by marginalized communities when it comes to obtaining an ID. A significant 19% of respondents without a driver's license cited bureaucratic or economic factors as the primary barriers. Factors like the cost of obtaining a license, financial or legal difficulties such as unpaid tickets or fines, lack of time, or even challenges related to obtaining the necessary underlying documents in the first place. Things like birth certificates, things like social security cards, things that sometimes we don't even think about. And I'll pass it over to Taylor. You're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you. So 2 out of 10 Americans living in a voter ID state do not have a current driver's license. And that's nearly 21 million voting age US citizens that lack that current driver's license. A few other facts that the report found is that 12% have a non-expired license, but not with the current address and name. Over 2.6 million US citizens do not have any form of government issue photo identification. So education and income impact ID possession, with 41% lacking a high school degree that also lack an ID. And then disability affects ID possession, with 20% of those identifying as disabled lacking an ID. So we see widespread uncertainty amongst Americans regarding their state's voter ID laws. More than half of Americans living in states where a photo ID is required, the person does not know their state's voter ID laws. This lack of awareness extends to not being familiar with the the specific ID type needed to successfully cast a ballot. This widespread confusion underscores the crucial need for voter education and outreach initiatives to ensure that all eligible voters have the information they need to participate in our democracy. So in this next section, we are going to dig into voter ID laws and the potential impact on the 2024 elections. So the voter ID landscape has dramatically changed since the last presidential election. From 2021 to 2023, there has been an unprecedented surge in the enactment of voter ID laws across the country. This surge has raised concerns about potential voter disenfranchisement, with millions of Americans at risk of being directly affected due to the lack of required identification. It's essential to recognize that these laws disproportionately impact marginalized communities, making existing inequalities in voting participation even worse. So since 2020, 17 states have implemented new or stricter voter ID laws affecting both in-person and mail-in voting. These changes have significant implications, particularly for the 34.5 million voting age citizens who do not possess a current driver's license. The intersection of these new laws and the large number of citizens without acceptable identification underscores the importance of our work. Because I love a little Florida history, here is some of our voter ID timeline. In 1977 is when our state legislature required that every voter present an ID to vote. Prior to that, the 67 different supervisor of elections were the ones that determined their ID requirements. And thank goodness we're not living with that today. In 1999 is when they began requiring a photo ID to vote. And then in 2016, a bill was passed that clarified the procedures for voters who lacked an ID at the polls, allowing them to vote a provisional ballot. In 2016, they also added 3 new categories of an acceptable form of ID, bringing our total to 12 acceptable IDs, which remains current still to this day. Our latest change in voter ID laws came in 2021 when Governor Ron DeSantis signed into law SB 90, which this required new vote by mail ID requirements, such as providing a driver's license, state ID number, or the last 4 digits of a social security number when requesting a vote by mail ballot. So now let's talk about ID education and what we need to know for 2024. So in-person voters in Florida must present a valid photo ID to confirm their identities at the polls. This ID must be unexpired. And if this ID does not have a signature, then the voter will have to present an additional ID with their signature, like a debit card. Voters must present an actual physical copy, so no digital ID cards or images are going to be accepted at the polls. So what are our accepted forms of ID? We have our Florida driver's license, Florida state ID card, US passport, military ID, student ID, public assistance ID, veterans health ID card that's issued by the VA, a retirement center ID, neighborhood associate ID, your debit or credit card, Florida concealed weapons license, Florida ID issued by US government or employment ID, Florida or local government. So these are all forms of identification that a voter can present at the polling location that meets the voter ID requirements in our state. So what happens if a registered voter in Florida forgets or doesn't have an acceptable photo ID and signature when they go and vote? They're not out of luck. They can still vote a provisional ballot. Now, this ballot will be counted if a couple of conditions are met. So first, they need to be an eligible voter and, of course, at the correct precinct. And second, this is the most important, that the signature that they provide on the provisional ballot must match the one on their voter registration record. A voter can also cure or fix their ballot by providing identification after the fact by 5 p.m. 2 days after the election. This way, even if they don't have their ID on hand, they will still have a way to make their voices heard. All right, so vote by mail. So this is the first presidential and the first general election since the purge of vote by mail rolls that is requiring a voter to provide ID information when requesting their vote by mail ballot. So on this slide, you can see the brand new vote by mail request form that went into effect on April 24th. And now that there is a clear line requesting ID information, either state driver's license, state ID number, or the last four of their social security. So any voter can request a vote by mail ballot, and they must provide, like I just said, their driver's license, state ID, last four of their social. Voters should be encouraged to use the same number that they use when registering, so that the SOE, so that it matches the SOE's records and just avoids any hiccups when requesting their vote by mail ballot. All right, so now we're going to transition more into VoteRiders tools and services and state resources. All right, so first up, my little bubble's not coming up, so it's making that link hard to read. But Sam, if you could drop it in the chat, the link tree. So in this next section, we're going to be dropping a lot of information on you all, but don't be worried. Anything that we're providing, we're going to send out in a recap email. You'll have access to the slides, as well as we've created a link tree for our partners. And this is really just a menu for how to find any and all of our information, it all in one place, in one location for you. So first up, we will talk about our voter ID state info pages. So these are the go-to public resource for all things related to voter identification in Florida. In 2024, we've made significant updates to these pages. We understand that navigating voter ID laws can be confusing, so we've prioritized plain language to make it easier for everyone to understand their rights and obligations. Our voter ID state info pages also provide comprehensive details on identification requirements for both in-person and mail-in voting. They'll find a full list of the accepted voter IDs. And our website also offers convenient links to request ID assistance, download informational cards for outreach efforts, and access our state's official elections website for additional resources. All information is available in both English and Spanish, making it accessible to a wider audience. There it goes. All right. So at VoteRiders, we understand that navigating the ID requirements can sometimes feel overwhelming for folks. So that's why we offer multiple channels for assistance, including our bilingual voter ID helpline and chatbot, which is managed by dedicated staff and volunteers. Whether a voter prefers to text or call, our helpline is here to help. They just simply have to contact 866 ID to vote. In addition to our helpline, we also offer one-on-one conversations through various platforms, including our website, Facebook, and Instagram. All of these channels are seamlessly connected to our assistance chatbot. So moving on to some kind of just partner-facing resources. First, we have our Florida Voter IDs Law Guide. And I just want to take this opportunity to give a shout out to Ellie Garcia, who previously held this position, who started this and created this guide for us. So this guide can be shared out. It includes detailed information and the laws on the IDs needed to vote in Florida, laws around acceptable IDs, first-time voters, voting provisionally, and absentee voting by mail. And this guide is also provided in Spanish. So one of VoteRiders' longest standing resources is our voter ID cards that are offered in both English and Spanish and are available for you to order. We will print and ship these info cards for free to nonpartisan nonprofit organizations. And it's a great way to spread the word about what IDs are needed and the assistance that VoteRiders can give. Unfortunately, we cannot send these cards to PO boxes, so just make sure that you provide us with a physical address. You can order cards at voteriders.org/cards. It'll be on the next slide. And it typically takes about 2 weeks to process and ship. So just keep that in mind when you're planning ahead. These cards are great for organizations tabling at community events, doing door-to-door lit drops, or at a service provider or community resource table. So these cards this is the expanded version for 2024. And you can see it has the IDs needed to vote and how to get in contact with VoteRiders if they need ID assistance. All right, so this is our last section, and we're going to get into how we partner with you in our 3 program areas: voter ID education, voter ID assistance, and ID comms and digital campaigns. And so first, we're going to start with ID education. So we partner with organizations to give state-specific voter ID trainings, educating and preparing voters to have proper identification when casting their ballots. Much of the ID education training is the first part of this briefing, where we dig into our laws and some of the research that we've done. These trainings are typically short, and they're great for guest spotlights for monthly community meetings or membership meetings, as well as if you're doing some sort of election preparation meeting. And of course, before a volunteer action. We also, for this year, are offering a training for canvassers and organizers. This training includes ID education. It talks about how to be an active listener and how to add an ID question when they're talking to the community, as well as how to connect a voter in need of ID assistance, and where to find our resources, as well as we've created some QR code stickers and tabling materials. And it's all kind of explained for an organizer or canvasser in that training. These trainings can be hosted in person as well as virtual. So we also partner with organizations to host letter writing parties and text banking. These events can be hosted in person or virtual, and we've created a resource folder that has items in it that will help you in the planning process for these events. So including things like event descriptions for social media outreach, or just social media graphics as well. For either of these actions, we can pull a targeted list that will focus on your organization's priorities for outreach. I'm definitely interested in partnering with organizations who are interested in sending letters to folks who need to re-enroll for vote by mail. These events can be hosted year round and can be used at any time to contact voters. So this is a sample of what our letter for 2024 looks like, including ID education, how they get in contact with us, and then an open area for volunteers to leave a personalized message. We also, like I mentioned, have created a centralized resource folder that we will continue to add things to for folks to use when they co-host volunteer events. So tabling and community and GOTV events. We also love to do tabling to get the word out about the work that VoteRiders does. So if you have any community events or GOTV events that you're planning for this year, please reach out, get in touch with us, and we would love to participate in all of the events and work that y'all are doing. So our direct voter contact partnership is ideal for organizations engaged in GOTV by adding an ID question to your scripts via VAN to ensure that every voter you contact has an ID to cast their ballot. For example, adding the line, "Do you have a valid photo ID with a signature to bring to the polls for voting?" is a perfect example of this. Once you add an ID question to your script and start contacting voters, you can periodically pull the data for folks who indicated that they need ID assistance, and VoteRiders volunteers will follow up with them. And then lastly, we have our partner voter ID leads. This is still a way for democracy partners to get communities connected to the assistance VoteRiders provides. We've created QR code stickers that will make it easier for hotspot voter registration programs and other tabling events organizers may be at to connect folks on the ground with ID assistance. All right, and I'm going to take a step back and pass it off to Sam.
Sure. So I am that ID assistance. Very often, that is one of my roles. So VoteRiders helps voters track down key documents, secure the ID that they need to cast a ballot that counts. Not only talking about securing state IDs, we're also talking about getting vital documents, things like birth certificates, as we mentioned, social security cards. We arrange transportation to ID issuing offices, things like DMVs. We provide pro bono legal assistance if necessary for folks that have been unnecessarily targeted. As we talked about some of those systemic inequalities, provides one-on-one support and guidance through the ID process. We also provide additional ID assistance to individuals in need of housing, work, or students. As I often like to say, doing this work since I've been here, you kind of need an ID to live. So we've got a lot of issues for these folks. We've got a lot of things we can help them with. So one of the ways that we do that is by doing our voter ID clinics. We can do them in person. We can do them virtually. This is a little bit embarrassing. I actually cannot see the whole slide because I'm looking at my own face. Okay, so we can also refer voters for ID assistance. Best partnership for direct service organizations and case managers. You can refer directly into our client management tool and queue. You can get the partner referral form at voteriders.org/ID form. I'm gonna drop a link in the chat if need be.
Awesome. And another add to the referrals, it is a drop down. So if this is something that your organization is interested in and your name isn't on the drop down, please reach out to us and we can add that. All right. And then So our comms team also works on making specialized resources for voter ID and ID assistance with ready-made sample language that you can include in emails, newsletters, and social medias, as well as resources for trans and non-binary voters. We're currently working on a 2024 resource for the Florida LGBT community, and then have additional resources for students and voters with disabilities. This is Sam and Mine's contact information once again. I know we've got some questions, so let me pull those up. Start with the top one. So Miami-Dade has a student ID that includes their photos and signature. They can use that to vote in Florida, right? I'm 99% certain they can. Yes, Josh, if their student ID, photo and signature, then it has the two components that they need. Now we are working with a intern that's learning about all of the colleges and which colleges have pictures on it versus signatures. So that's something that hopefully in the future we'll be able to do some advocacy work on. A lot of student IDs only have their signatures. So that would be an instance where they would need another one with their photo and bring those two together. But to answer your question, if the college ID has the photo and signature, that is the only ID they need for voting. So when you say public assistance ID, would a homeless shelter ID or a food stamp card work? I do not believe the food stamp card does, but if there is an ID from the homeless shelter that has photo, has signature and personal information on it, that would be an example of a public assistance ID.
Ooh, that's a good one.
How are signature matches accommodated for when a person's signature varies as a result of a disability, which directly impacts handwriting? Um, I'm not a expert on this. I would say that I would reach out to the Florida Rights Disability Center and ask them. I don't want to mislead anyone in answering this question. Um, all right, so Cassandra. We have postcards, remaining folks for vote by mail. I'd love to do a letter writing party with you as well. Carol asked, what voter info do you need to follow up with a voter in need of ID, van ID, or what? We would just ask that the organization run a list for us of those that indicated they need ID assistance. I believe that would be name and contact information. And then that'll allow our volunteers to work through that list. Cecile, I can send you a link. I can't, just how the webinar set up, I can't do a live showing of the referral dropdown, but all of this is going to come to folks in an email. And so you can check once we send that link out to see if your organization's on there. Can volunteers get trained to help with voter ID assistance in addition to the text banking and letter banking, or is this something that's reserved for your organizers? No, not at all. We do a national voter ID assistance training. I believe it's once a month on Wednesdays. This training looks like an orientation. It gets volunteers just acclimated with the type of work that we do. And then there are a few additional trainings for Zendesk, which is our case management platform, and then making sure that we kind of get in the weeds of how do we actually acquire these ID for folks. We'll include how volunteers can sign up for that training in our recap. So last question, has VoteRiders found cultural barriers to people getting voter ID? If so, if you can give an example. I believe that the most like cultural barriers and the research that we've done has really fallen with folks that are in need of IDs that fall below the poverty line. There seems to be a greater impact just in daily life not having access to an ID, because we also recognize that it affects jobs, housing, employment, all of those type of areas outside of voting, and tends to impact those with of marginalized communities more.
Yeah, definitely in my time with the org and what little experience I've been able to have out in the field, it is primarily a class issue. It is especially a massive issue among the houseless, obviously, for obvious reasons. A lot of people that have been unjustly targeted by forms of state violence, things like that. Definitely class above all else.
Awesome. So back up on the screen is our contact information.
We have three more questions.
Oh, so Cecile asked, what are specific ways you can help trans and non-binary voters, especially from the DMSV memo that came down? One of the things that we are doing is we can help trans and non-binary voters get a federal form of ID. So that looks like acquiring a passport for an individual. Another way that we help those individuals is we offer funding for name and gender marker changes. So that is how we work with those communities.
Then we have a question. Do you find reluctance to obtain ID? When people think that our work is exclusively like getting them signed up to vote or maybe getting like a voter ID, yes. But once people realize we can do, birth certificates and social security cards, they are amazed because no one else is necessarily doing that or thinking about that, let alone helping to pay for it and get them to where they need to go. Um, God, the amount of times that I've met people where transportation is the primary thing stopping them too, can't say enough. Us being able to pay for a Lyft or an Uber is a massive thing for them.
Definitely. I wouldn't say it's a reluctance as much as they themselves don't know the process of how to acquire those IDs. So as soon as it kind of the realization of, oh, these folks can help me through that process, it becomes a partnership. So who does the signature matching for provisional ballots? That's going to be your county canvassing boards. And that happens in the process after the election has taken place. Just a heads up, Democracy Partner Resources. I will fix that right after this so everybody can have access. Cecile, do you pay for passports? That is something that we do specifically for our LGBT community for voting purposes. We got a long one. Does an ID have to have an address on it to be effective for voting? Home. We have a voucher to get them IDs that say general delivery instead of that's a great question. When we work with the unhomed, we'll get letters from a shelter for that identification to put on ID. So they would register to vote with that ID, then it would all match. I'm gonna copy and paste this because I don't want to answer something incorrectly, and do a follow-up on this.
Well, I can chime in, having done a fair amount of voter registration with houseless folks as well. As long as they have an address of a shelter they are or have stayed in, believe that is enough. Obviously, Taylor, let's definitely get them some resources, make sure I'm not talking on my ass here. But I believe that works.
Awesome. All right. Well, we are finishing up a little bit early. Make sure. I did have a poll. Selene, do you see polls on the bottom of your menu? Maybe. We'll see if we can get this to work.
Yes.
There's one that says Florida briefing on it. Would you try and launch that for me?
There's a Florida call to action and an untitled.
Florida call to action. Perfect. So just launching a poll up. Always want to get feedback from folks. If you are an organization that is interested in ID education or ID assistance work, if you would select that, or if there's anything that you would like further information about that we talked about, our trainings, letter writing parties, text banking, tabling events, direct voter contacts, ID clinics, or referrals. This is just a way for us to gather your information so we know what to reach out to you about and how we can partner this next year together.
Colette says they would love to look into our resources, help them get IDs with an address on it. We would also love that. That sounds great.
Awesome. So following this, in the next couple days, you will receive an email from me. It's going to have all of the slide decks, our link trees and resources, and we will be in contact with folks in the future.
We got one more question real quick. Where in Florida can you do in-person work and get into the community? Where do you need me? Where do you want us to be? We are the statewide coordinator and organizer. Where you want us? Where's the need? If it's not us, it's one of our volunteers or trusted community partners.
So Sam is located and based out of Tampa, and I'm based out of Orlando, but I think we can both equally say that we love to travel, and I do. And so I'm down to go where the needs met at. So thank y'all so much for joining us today.
Thanks, y'all.